Hi, I'm Tony, and today we're going to foundation paper piece. This video is a walkthrough of the pattern for the foundation paper piece star. I'm going to take you step by step how to make this pattern, as well as how to resize it if you want to have it different sizes. So it is meant to accompany my pattern. So if you have not yet gotten the pattern, the link is down below. It's only $2 to pick it up. And let's get sewing. Step number 1, print your entire pattern out, or just print out step number 8. If you are low on ink in your printer, this is the only page you absolutely have to print out. I've printed out the entire pattern just because it's easier for me to follow along and mark off whenever I've done these things. So you really only have to print out that last page. So according to the instructions before you start sewing, you want to measure this. So print page 8, and we're going to measure this block right here. And this is what I'm going to talk about for resizing as well. So here is our block number 1. If you want it at a 6-inch finished block, 6.5 by 6.5 cut, this should be a 1-inch block right there. Now, let's say if you want this block to only be 3 inches. Then reduce it. You can actually reduce the percentage on for what you print directly onto your printer, and then this should only be a 1/2 inch. So let's say if you reduce it by 60%, then this block right here should print out at a 6/10 of an inch. So it's going to be in relation. So this block right here is your measurement tool. If you're making it a 6.5, then you should measure it at 1 inch. And mine does, so I know mine is okay. After you do that, now remember your paper pattern is reversed. What that means is this is actually the A block, this is the C block, that is B, that is D, that is F, and that is E. So it's reversed from what it is. The star is symmetrical though, so it really doesn't make it too much of a difference. And then let's go ahead and cut this out. So once you make sure that that is all good, your next step is to cut these pieces out. So when we cut our pieces out, we're going to cut them out with a bit of space around that dotted line. So that dotted line is what we're going to square it up to after we're done. So do not cut along that dotted line. You want to cut around it. So in this case, see how I cut between those two? And the same thing goes here. So we're going to cut out our pieces, and I'm going to lay them out just like that and get everything ready to go. Now, after I cut out all of these paper pieces, the next step is to cut out my fabric. So we have our paper pieces ready to go. So now I'm going to actually cut my fabric. Now I am using scraps. I just grabbed a bunch of scraps. You notice how I'm doing it in a different color scheme than the original one I have. So I just grabbed some nice gold and some black. You don't have to use the colors that are in the pattern. If you want to switch this up, where it says here, your yellow and your blue, go ahead and just cross that off and put a different color in there. It's totally okay to switch it up and make different colors. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and fast forward the video, and we're going to cut out all of our yellow pieces and all of our blue pieces. So I'm using gold for yellow and black for blue in this case. We have all of our fabric cut out. We have all of our pieces ready to go. So now, how do we put this together? Well, I'm actually going to show you a faster, more efficient way to putting this together. I assume that you have some basic foundation paper piecing knowledge, or you've watched my my video on the Triforce and how to make that. If not, the link is down below. Please watch that before attempting this one. That pattern is free, and please do that first. So I'm assuming you've either done that or you have a basic foundation paper piecing knowledge. So to be more efficient, I'm actually going to group up in a couple different ways. All right, so A1, let's see. A1 is the 4" by 5". So let's make sure I've got the right one. Yes. Okay. Now, whenever we're doing this, oh, you know what I forgot? I forgot my glue. I forgot my starting glue. Woohoo! So to start this, I like to use a little bit of glue. What you want to do is have the wrong side be on the wrong side. So I'm going to take it and put a dot of the water-soluble glue in the center of my pattern, and then I'm going to center it on there. Now let's do a couple of these. Now C1 is the same thing. C1, and I'm actually going to cross these off on my pattern to make sure that, yes, I've done these. Same thing with the C1. We're going to put a dot there, and then put that right into there. And we've got that one. And you know what? Let's just keep on working. Let's see what all of the ones are going to be. Now, I try to make my patterns very simple, starting with the ones. So B1, D1, E1, F2, so on and so on, F1, E1. Now, you notice how D1 and B1 is here, E1 and F1 is opposite? That's because when you're ironing your seams, you're ironing them towards the one that you're adding on. So in this case, you see how these seams are ironed in opposite directions. So I've already thought ahead, and they're going to line up. So let's start with B1. So our B1 is our 3" by 3" yellow. So that's this one right here. Again, we're centering it over B1. So we have to make sure that the entire thing is centered just like that over B1. So let's put a little dot in the middle of B1 and centered just like that. And then now D1 is going to be the same thing, because remember, this is a very symmetrical pattern. Just like that. Great. And that's there. Now E1. Let's see, I did D1. So E1 is a 4x4 black piece. So it's this one right here. Let's make sure, yep, 4x4. So put a dot in the center. Now remember, we're centering this up for the piece that we're using. So we're centering this up for E1, not for the entire thing. So center the fabric around E1. Same thing with this one. We're going to take this, we're going to center this fabric around F1. Just like that. Now, we're going to start folding and adding in fabric. Okay, so I'm going to reverse this back to A1. Now we want to add in this A2 fabric. So the first thing we want to do is we want to take our A2, fold it towards our A1, and then get my straight edge. We want to trim this a 1/4 inch away. So in the instructions, it says, let me actually read it exactly what the instructions say. Fold the paper along the line between A1 and A2 so the fabric is not folded. You see how the fabric is straight here? And it is visible. So you fold this so the fabric is straight, just like that. Now we're going to trim this, like I said, a 1/4 inch away from that fabric fold. And then we're going to open this back up again. Now, from this here on end, we're going to flip this over here and work on this end. So with our A2, that's a 2" by a 2.5 inch. Yep, it's this one right here. And we're going to place this centered over where we're going. All right, so we are going this way. So if you take this and you fold this over here, you're going that way. Now you notice how I have a little bit of white. If I were to keep it exactly like this, there's a bit of white over on that end. Now if I flip that back over, it's not that important because it's outside of the dotted line. However, if I can take this and move this more to the left and then fold that and not have any paper showing, that's what you want to go for. You want to fold this in a way so that you don't see any paper showing, just like that. Okay? So that right there is perfect placement. So at this point, if you've watched the basic tutorial video, you know that you can use glue or you can use pins. I'm just a fan of pins from this point on. I just like using my water-soluble glue for the first step. So there is our A block. Let's do the same exact thing to the C block. So we're folding this back. I am trimming a 1/4 inch from the fold. Now the C block, remember, mirrors the A block, so it's the exact same thing. And fold, yep, that's a good one. There. All right, next up is the B block. The B block, oops, there we go. Come on, baby. There we are. Fantastic. The B block, B2, is the 4 inch by 4 inch. That's right. I'm like, why was it 4 inches by 4 inches? Now I remember. So this is 4 inches by 4 inches because of the angle of it. This angle was so weird. I went super large with this pattern just to make sure it was there. Now remember, with foundation paper piecing patterns, you are going to get a lot of waste. That's just the nature of foundation paper piece patterns. But you can always take that waste and set it aside and use it for another block. All right, so let's do this. And if I fold that, there we are. See what I mean? See how that was, how I had to fold that in a weird way to make sure. Technically, I didn't have to make that as long, but it's always better to have a larger piece than you need to. It's always best to have too much than too little. But the nice thing also about foundation paper pieced patterns is you can use a lot of scrap fabric when you're doing them. All right, so same thing here. And let's do that. And open this back up again. And this is the other 4 inch. And I'm going to go this way with it. Because then whenever I fold it over, yep, that's it. Great. And last but not least, we have our E block and our F block. Okay, now our E block and our F block, if you notice, there are 3 pieces to this. You have E1, E2, and 3, unlike these others where you just have your 2 pieces. So in this case, we're going to worry about just E2. Okay, we have our E1 here, so let's fold over our E2 piece and trim that. Now, our E2 piece is the 3 inch by 2 inch yellow, or in my case, gold fabric here. Now, remember, we are only concerned about covering E2, which is up here. So I'm going to take this fabric and I'm going to, again, right side to right side, center this over this E2 area. And then let me fold it to make sure it's going to cover it, and it is. And I'm going to, in fact, flip it to the other side to make sure, yep, everything is perfectly covered for that. Great. So let's go ahead and pin that. Great, just like that. And then the same thing to this one. So folding it over where F2 is. And trimming. And our F2 is right here. So we're going to take this and I'm going to hover it over right to the F2. No, I think I need to shift it up a bit. There we are. That covers the whole thing now. So move your fabric left or right, depending upon what you need to do in order to cover the actual paper the whole way. All right, so we have all of our pieces. So now I'm going to go over to the machine and I'm going to sew these pieces. Now, again, hopefully you know basic foundation paper piecing. You know how to foundation paper piece, or you've watched and done the Triforce video. So I'm just going to give you a quick reminder right here, and then when I'm going to move to the machine and I'm going to actually sew them in super speed, so this video isn't too long. So I'm going to actually start all the way out here in the actual dotted lines and sew down. I don't have to secure in my stitches. I just have to start here and go all the way down. Same thing with that one. For this one, same thing, starting all the way out here and going down. Now, the only one that's a little different is the E and the F. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start all the way out here, and I'm going to move all the way down, and I'm going to continue into E3 past this line at least a 1/4 inch. Okay? So when you're sewing this one, here, all the way down, past it, at least a 1/4 inch, and then that's where you're going to stop. So let's go ahead and sew. Everything is sewn. So now we want to iron this. Now when we iron it, we want to always iron towards the newest piece that we have added on. So in the case of A1, A2, we want to iron this towards A2. Same thing, C1, C2, we want to iron this towards C2. Now, whenever I iron mine, I like to use steam because it makes sure that this seam is really good. But beware, if you use steam, that paper is going to get a little wrinkled. It's going to get a little warped. You may have a little bit of an issue, but that's perfectly fine. You don't have to worry about that because the paper's eventually coming out. Okay, here's B2. I'm like, where's B2? There we go. Now, you notice on this one, you can see a little bit of paper. But if we turn this over, you see that paper is outside of the dotted lines. That is perfectly okay. So as long as all of the fabric is within the dotted lines, that is what matters. So what I'm saying is that if you use steam for foundation paper piecing, when your paper starts to curl a little bit, don't worry about it. It's perfectly fine. Now, all of these pieces are done. These pieces are not, because remember, the E and the F still has a third piece that I have to do. So, now, let's go ahead and add that third piece on. So I'm going to take these, set them aside, because we still have to sew one more piece onto here. So now we're going to do E3 and F3. Now, when we're doing this, remember, we sewed beyond that line. That's what it looks like. We sewed beyond the line a 1/4 inch. So what we want to do is we want to very gently pull the paper away from the fabric. So very gently pulling it away so that we can fold this. Now, we're not pulling up the seam. We're not taking apart the thread. We're only pulling the paper away from that seam. Okay? All right, and then let's go ahead and trim that. So you do have to do it very carefully and gently. That way you don't accidentally pull any of those seams out. And there we are. There is our piece. And obviously we have 2 pieces of fabric left, so it's going to be this one. All right, so let's center this and fold it and see if I've got it sent. Oh, hey, I think I've got it centered pretty good. Look at that. Perfect. That covers the whole thing. So I think I'm good to go. So let's go ahead and do this, and then I'm going to do the same exact thing for the other piece. And then I'm going to go to the machine. I'm going to sew both of these. Again, when I sew it, we're going to start out beyond the dotted line, sew through and finish beyond the dotted line. And then I'll kind of come back and we're going to iron it. And then I'll show you the next step. Okay, everything is sewn and ready to go. So we're done, right? Well, now we have to assemble all these pieces. So the first thing we have to do is we have to trim our edges. Now, this dotted line is a 1/4 inch away from our solid line. All right, so these are our seam allowance guides. At this point, trim every single block. You have 2 choices. You can line it up along the solid line and just go ahead and trim over, trim through there, or make sure that you lined up along the dotted line. So you can use this as a guide for 1/4 inch, or just make sure you're cutting on the dotted line. Doesn't make a difference. The thing you do want to do, though, is make sure you are not using the same rotary blade. We are cutting through paper, and paper dulls your rotary blade. So please, 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 please use a different rotary blade for this step than you did for the first step. All right, so I'm going to cut through all these and we're going to lay this out. So we have all of our pieces cut out. Now let's assemble them. Now your first inclination goes, oh, well, let's just go ahead and sew, this one to that one, that one to that one, that one to that one. You normally could do that if it was straight. However, look here. You see how there's a slight curve here? So that means you have to do these 2 first. So in the instructions, it says to sew the A block to the B block and the C block to the D block. So for the A block, you want it to line up so that the, oops, you know what? Look, I forgot one of my trim lines. I was like, that doesn't quite look right. Now it does. Now you want to line this up. There we go. So that A2 and B1 and A1 and B2, just like that. So let's flip this back over. And we're going to take this, and we're going to take the bottom and flip it up right here over the top. Just like that. Now, what I am going to do, now in the lightning pattern and a couple other patterns, there's blocks to offset it. What you want to do is whenever you are, let me make sure I do this right. Yes, a little bit to the right. Whenever you do the B block to the A block, you want to shift it to the right just a touch. Don't do it super, but if it's not quite enough to where I have to put a black mark on there for lining it up, you just want to do it a touch. And I'm going to show you what that touch looks like. If you don't do it a touch, it'll still work. See how it's just overlapping that, and you can just see that fabric over there? So same thing with here. We're going to bring this off to the left just a touch. And see, and how you can tell that is if you fold that there. Yeah, now that's perfect. There we go. Is if you fold that along the line that is the sew line. There we are. And then there. Perfect. Okay, so now we're going to take these over to the sewing machine. I'm going to use my, in fact, you know what? Let me just show you on the sewing machine. Now, whenever I'm sewing this, I'm going to treat it like it's a regular quilt block. So I'm going to use my leader and ender fabric for chain piecing. And that's only to make sure it's super secure at the beginning. There we go. But I'm not measuring a 1/4 inch. I am sewing along that line. There we are, and let's put the next one in. So even though I'm pretending that this is chain piecing and using my leader ender, I'm still foundation paper piecing and sewing along that line. Okay, and the same thing here. I'm going to take this leader ender fabric and put it back in here. There we are. Let's take this over and iron it. Now, with these, you want to iron these seams open. Okay, so what does that mean? That means go ahead and iron it towards one side. But then you want to flip it over and iron this open. So I'm going to take my finger and I'm going to put it in there. Now, if you have a stiletto or a press or anything like that, you can put that in there. I'm used to lots of heat on my fingers, so it doesn't bother me. But you want to iron. You want to make sure that you take these seams and put them open. And this is important whenever you're combining these blocks. And this does say in the instructions to iron these seams open. Okay, so that's very, very important. Now, let's go ahead and bring this back and bring these. So now what I want to do is, at this point, sew these two together and sew those two together. So we're going to pop that open there, and then we're going to take this and sew that together here. There we are. Let's line that up. Now, in this case, you want to make sure that your fabric is lined up. There we go. So make sure that these two fabric pieces are lined up just against each other. And if you do that, you will have perfect seams. So I'm going to make sure I put a pin right in there. A pin in there. And here. Great. Same thing with here. We're taking these two and we're putting them there. So I'm making sure that those line up perfectly up here. And I can feel the seam to make sure that those two are lined up. Oops. And then making sure that this opened seam here also lines up. So you see how that open seam lines up just like that? That's what you're looking for. So when you line those up, that is how you get your perfect points. Okay, and then let's... There we are. Beautiful. Okay, all right, let's go sew it. Okay, so we're taking our bottom and we're flipping it open. Now, the first thing, the trick you want to do with the top and the bottom is line it up so that those open seams line up. So you see our open seams here? That's what you want to line up first. Do that first. So let's do that one, and then we'll line up the rest of them. Now, in this case, remember our seams were ironed in opposite directions, so they will nest. No, they won't. Oh, that's right, because it's at a 1/4 inch offset. All right, nope, that's fine. They're not going to line up perfectly. I would just, as long as you line up that center one, the rest should line up. Should being the operative word. We'll find out whenever... Now, if you want to find out, you can put the pin in at the line and open it up to check. Yes, yep, that looks good. Okay. Here we are. All right, let's see. Let's see how it looks. All right, and we're ironing our seams open. And there it is. Let me go ahead and do this. Here we are. And we have our seam open. All right, at this point, we have our star. We have our shining star. All right, so the last step is you want to get all of that paper out. So we're going to remove the paper. So gently, one at a time, go ahead and pull that paper away. Try not to pull more than one piece at a time. So even though this piece here was trapped in there, you don't want to pull them both at the same time, because then you'll start pulling out the actual seam. You do not want to pull out the actual seam. You're going to leave some paper in there. Just pick it out with some tweezers. And I realized I forgot to grab my tweezers. Man, I'm forgetting everything today. There's my tweezers. My favorite tweezers are, of course, the Famore 507s, because they've got a nice sharp edge to grab all the little pieces of paper, and they're angled, so it's easy to get in there. It's also easy to get in there and grab these hard to grab little pieces of paper that maybe my nails can't get to. There we are. So now I'm going to go ahead and pull all the paper out of here. We're going to super speed through it, and I will come back and show you the last step. My paper is out. So now let's finish off this block. Step number 1. You've just ruined all those seams. You've absolutely just ruined all those seams with your pulling out of your paper. So go ahead and just re-iron everything. So re-iron your seams on your back. Make sure they're nice and flat, because we're going to stretch this out on the front so that we can square this block up. Whoops. I messed that seam up right there. Come on. There we are. Now you're good to go. Alright, so now we're going to take this. Let's go ahead and iron this out. Make sure everything is ironed out as much as we can, because now we're going to square this up. So let's go ahead and square this up to 6.5 inches. Okay. There we are. And there's our block. There is your star block. And that's the star block. It's as simple as that. So hopefully this video helped you create your star block. If you've made one, show them to me. Send me pictures. I love to see the things that people make. Don't forget to like this video. Follow my YouTube as well as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch. Pinterest, my Quite Nerdy Quilters Facebook group, and catch me when I stream live. I stream live both on Twitch and on YouTube. Make sure to check my social media for my schedules. Have a fantastic day.